Good morning, class, and welcome to week 3, chapter 2 of Logic and Critical Thinking. This week, we're going to be looking at what I would say is one of my favorite chapters. It deals with language, particularly how language relates to logic and critical thinking. And this chapter has quite a few fascinating articles in it. And those articles, perhaps the first thing one should do when looking at this chapter after maybe looking at all the titles of the articles and while reading through the articles is to ask, how can these very different articles possibly relate to each other? They're all going to relate, obviously, with the idea of language, but they can essentially be broken up into two different groups. So one set of articles will deal with the complexity of language, which is a fascinating topic in and of itself. When we are communicating, whether it's writing premises or listening to dialogue, all of the terms there, particularly the nouns, are going to have complex meanings, particularly when in relation to the other words in the sentence and in the overall idea. The other group of articles can essentially be, its focus will be, how do you know you're getting a balanced understanding of all of the facts? So these articles will look at how one knows that when they're trying to assess a situation, they're getting a balanced viewpoint. And you might say, well, what does that have to do with language? Well, this sort of shows how language is related to concepts. And concepts are often formed by how we gather information. And we form a concept of something based on the available information we have. And so another part of being critical is knowing or trying to determine that is a balanced viewpoint. And I'll explain what that means in a second. The articles that relate to the former, that's the complexity of language, will be the one by Lewis Thomas and the one by Gertrude Stein. So those really emphasize just how complex language is. The ones that deal with the latter, how to know that you're getting a balanced viewpoint when taking in a situation, when observing a situation, those will be the one by Stephen Jay Gould, Michael Slackman, and Douglas Adams. And they're all great articles. A few vocabulary or concepts that you want to look for, I'm gonna go through three, is one is web of beliefs. So be sure to have a good understanding of web of beliefs, or at least be investigating what this term means. If you get through the chapter and you don't have a clue about the web of beliefs, then feel free to send me an email. The second will be search image, and this is a particular term that Stephen Jay Gould uses, and we'll go over that a bit in this video. And the third is paradigm shift. This is something that might not be in the chapter itself. It's a term often used in philosophy of science. It's used a lot in the book by Thomas Kuhn, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, which is a book I recommend that everyone read. And but we see paradigm shifts going on, and particularly in the last story by Douglas Adams, but also in the one by Michael Slackman as well. And so I'm going to outline what those three concepts are in this video. We are also looking at the idea of a statement being true versus a statement being warranted. And both of those ideas relate to how we interpret facts. So if we say it's a fact that this happened or this will happen, you can look at the fact as something that's true or something that's warranted. And our textbook likes the idea of warranted versus true. And so this is an ongoing debate you can have while reading the textbook, and try to sort of look at your view of how to understand a fact. Is it something that's warranted or something that is true? And those two things can be slightly different. The chapter should provide examples. They do provide examples. Those examples should be effective, but if they're not, again, let me know. Okay, just a bit of explaining the sort of the weekly logistics. So last week we looked at the introductory chapter. Everyone turned in one study question and one exercise question. I have read all but 9 of those. I should complete those today and give you feedback. Today, with this video, I'll also post our second assignment, which will be to choose one study and one exercise question from this chapter. On Wednesday, tomorrow, I will post a discussion question, and this will be on the discussion board in Canvas, and it'll be based off of study question 1. So we essentially look at a chapter for 2 weeks, but the second week we share the chapter with the next chapter. So we'll be having a discussion and a bit of a reflection on the materials of chapter 1, whereas we'll be beginning to answer questions and getting feedback on chapter 2. Okay, so let's begin. And I like that the book uses a variety of situations. What's the difference between something being true and something being warranted? Well, true just means that it corresponds to reality. And warranted means that someone is justified in believing something, even though it might not necessarily turn out to be true in the future. But given the information available to them at the time, it was a warranted belief to have. So a good example, if we think back maybe 1,000 years, if someone asked, is the Earth the center of the universe? Or sorry, the solar system. Someone might say yes. Yes, I believe that the Earth is the center of the solar system. And that belief would not be true, but it would be warranted in the sense that that was the consensus belief. In many places, all of the information pointed to that, and that was considered an established fact. Now, so a person at that time period would be warranted for believing that the Earth was the center of the solar system, whereas now they would not be warranted because we have too many contrary facts to that statement. So a warranted statement can change, and it can change gradually over time, or it can change quickly. The example the text uses is thinking that a person has taken your logic and critical thinking book. So suppose you're on the bus and you can't find your book, and then you see the person sitting next to you holding what you think is your book, right? And so now you're saying, did they take my book? And so you ask them, and they say, no, I'm also in this class. This is my book. And so now, at first, you thought that they might have taken your book, but then when you get the answer that they didn't, your ideas kind of change. So, oh, okay, they must be in the class. But then, as they're flipping through your book, or the book that you're not sure is yours, you're still trying to determine whether that belief that they took your book is warranted. You see that they've underlined the same things you've underlined, and you even see your name on one of the pages. Then you say, no, they took my book, and that is a warranted statement. Now, they could say, no, I just wrote that name in this book, and I also underlined those exact same things. And that, I think most people would say, okay, that's when you stop believing them. Now, exactly why you stop believing them there, that's a difficult thing to articulate fully in critical thinking. It just seems too unbelievable. That wouldn't be a claim that would be warranted to believe. And suppose you told that to others, right, people in authority, they would also not believe that claim that the person made, that they wrote your name in the book, right? But is it just consensus, right? Is it just that the majority of people in the society we're living in would not believe that claim that makes it unwarranted? Or is it something else? Is there another sort of logical reason why we wouldn't believe that? So that has to do with truth versus warranted claims when it comes to fact. Let's look at the idea of search image. And so if we scroll down here, we get this in the second article by Stephen Jay Gould. And I'm gonna use a different example than the one he uses. He uses snail fossils. I won't use that one, but do read the article. And you, if you like, you might also do this as a study question. What does Good mean by the phenomenon search image? Describe a time when you experienced search image successfully or unsuccessfully. And then recall what the two different focuses are in this article. So when we ask the question, when we're trying to assess a situation, how do you know that you're getting a balanced understanding of all of the facts, right? So for me with search image, I always experience it mostly when I'm thinking about buying a particular new car. So suppose I'm thinking about buying a particular car, and I imagine the car. So I have the concept of the car in my mind. And then when I'm driving on the freeway, I see a lot more of those cars. Now, it would be incorrect to just think that more of those cars automatically started to exist, right? And it's more the sense that because I have the concept in my mind and I've been thinking about it, I notice more of those particular types of cars on the freeway. Now, if someone asks me how many of these cars do you think are out there, I might give a statistical average that might be greater than it actually is, right? So if you said, do you think there's more of this type of car, the car that you saw a lot of on the freeway, or another type of car, the car that you didn't see any of? I might say, oh, I think there was a lot more of the car I saw a lot of. But in reality, had I been thinking of purchasing the other car, I may have seen 10 of them on the road and none of the other one that I saw. And so search image has to do with those things that you have the concepts for, that you've been trained to see or to look at or to focus on, are the things that you notice in reality. When Good is going down to an archaeological site, he sees a lot of snail fossils because that's what he's been trained, that's his expertise. He knows a lot about them. He has the concepts of them in his mind. He doesn't see a lot of other fossils, but other individuals who have been trained to see those types of fossils, they see those fossils. And so if he was just asked what is in this archaeological site, he would say there's a lot of snail fossils, but he wouldn't have been able to identify, or he may have just not even noticed the other ones. But then the question for critical thinking becomes, well, how do we get an accurate understanding of everything that's there in the archaeological site in that context? But when we're thinking about a critical issue, whatever it is, how do we know that we're getting a balanced understanding of all the information, particularly if we're not focused on certain things, or particularly, and this is how language and logic relate to each other, what if we don't have a concept in our mind of something that's very prevalent in a particular situation, but we're just not aware of because our concept of it is not developed? So this search image deals with this. A web of beliefs. A web of beliefs, that will be our second one. Let me scroll to it. It's over here. Here's the one on warranted statements. So definitely look at that when you're reading through. So here we have web of beliefs. A web of beliefs is quite different from other forms of epistemology, such as a foundationalism. In a web of beliefs, and they took this from the philosopher Quine, who we'll talk about later. There's core beliefs in the web of beliefs in the center. Think of like a spider web or a series of circles, or a web is probably the best analogy. And at the center you have core beliefs. These are foundational beliefs that structure the way you see the world, or what we might call a worldview. And then on the peripheral are less important beliefs, and these beliefs can often be rearranged. The example I often give is when I teach, I often forget where I park because there's different classrooms and different parking lots. So suppose, for example, I park in a certain parking lot and go in to teach, and then when I come out, I have a belief that that I parked in this one parking lot in this one spot. Now this type of belief would be on the peripheral, but it also attaches to other stronger beliefs, that I own a particular type of car, that I work at a particular school, that I was just teaching. And so all those beliefs are connected. They kind of form a web or a view of what you understand to be factual claims. Now suppose I walk out to where I think I parked my car and I don't see it. But then I look across the parking lot and I see it on the other side. I can quickly rearrange my web of beliefs and say, oh, that belief I had that I parked on one side of the parking lot is not warranted anymore. And I'm going to switch it around and say I parked on the other side of the parking lot. Now, if for some reason, hypothetically, it's not, but for some reason this belief was very important to me, that I parked here, I could start rearranging things in the webs of belief differently. I could have said, well, maybe someone moved my car, right? Now this wouldn't be warranted, but you could do it, right? And then you could make up reasons why you thought someone may have moved your car. This gets into this concept of conspiracy theory really quickly, which is what another article, the Michael Slacksman article, talks about, right? If we have very important beliefs in our web of beliefs that defy other warranted claims, we can rearrange them to sound, to make the one belief seem true, even at all cost, Quine will say, right? So we could invent these rather elaborate ideas on why the car was moved. But why would we do that? That's what we have to think critically about. And what do we make of those beliefs when they start to go against consensus? This will be another thing this chapter talks about. Now, instead of the car scenario, when you walk out and you see a car or you see where you thought you parked your car and you didn't, imagine something much more important. Imagine you've lived at your house for 20 years and you have 20 years of experiences. And so the fact that I live here, that's going to be at the center of your web of beliefs. That's sort of structuring the whole thing. And then one day you walk home and you go to open the door and another family is living at that house. And you say, what are you doing in my house? And they say, what do you mean? This is our house. We've lived here for the past 20 years. Now, your entire web of beliefs may come crashing down, right? Because all of your beliefs that are connected to the house, almost all of them, right? Like the pets you own, your childhood, all of this is now in question. And so this is belief that is so important to your web of beliefs that without it, the web itself can no longer maintain, and all of it would have to be restructured in some unimaginable way. So this web of beliefs, the truth in the beliefs relate to the other true statements in the beliefs. What makes a claim true, or in this case warranted, is that it relates to the other warranted statements in the belief systems. And lastly, for a paradigm shift, and this I think relates best to the last article, which is a really funny article. I don't want to tell you the ending. It's only about a page, this article, and it's really funny. I think I passed it though. Yes, The Cookies by Douglas Adams. I won't use this example. You can use this example, or you can analyze it. But what you want to think about here is the paradigm shift. When I mentioned the idea of the Earth being the center of the solar system as opposed to the sun, this is a classic example that the philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn uses for paradigm shift. And so at a certain time period, the Copernican model and the Ptolemaic model, the Earth-centered and the heliocentered, sun-centered model, were sort of in competition with each other. And a critical thinker would sort of go back and forth. Both models made a certain amount of sense at a certain time period, meaning there was about an equal evidence and equal justification for both. Both predicted the movements of the planets, both made observations, both were very scientific. One wasn't necessarily superior to another. And so when you shift from paradigm to paradigm, what you'd be doing is saying, well, perhaps it's the geocentered model, perhaps that's what it is. And so that paradigm or that way of looking at it would be in your mind. And then you'd hear more evidence for the heliocentered, and then you'd shift. But you're not just making one little correction in your web of beliefs, so to speak. You're literally rearranging the entire solar system when you're reconsidering the structure, right? And so you're shifting the entire paradigm from the sun being the center back to the earth being the center, back to the sun being the center. And so you're undergoing these paradigm shifts. And we often can do this in many things. When the book gives the example of the person you think steals your book, you might sort of shift from one paradigm to the next. Am I a jerk for thinking they're a thief? Or did they steal the book? And you keep going back and forth. You're like, and you as you reconsider these different evidences or these different bit of data, you keep sort of oscillating or shifting from one to another. And this is what happens in the cookie story. So see the paradigm shift and see how with new evidence you reinterpret the entire situation. And this is something that often happens or fails to happen with a lot of conspiracy theories. And this is what Michael Slacksman discusses in one of them. If we turn to some of the exercise questions, let's look at 1 and 2. Again, you only have to do one. And I mentioned before, you usually want to give a paragraph. About 8 sentences would work. But certain ones that instruct you to do something different, like exercise 1, words are often used differently in different generations. List 10 words you or your friends might use whose meaning your parents might find puzzling. If in that sense, you would just list 10 words and then the meaning and then of those words and then why you think they would be puzzling. So that would just be 10 brief sentences or partial sentences, right? And but do try to explain why they would find them puzzling. Now, this question 2 is a lot more of an interesting idea because this will take a lot of what we learned. Is the statement Columbus discovered America in 1492, is it a warranted statement? Defend your answer. Now this combines a lot of what this chapter hopes to display. The complexity of language. Now that's present in this. And also, how do you know that you're getting a balanced understanding of of all of the facts, right? And so first you want to look at this sentence and what does this sentence, the words and the phrase, communicate in a variety of ways, right? What is all the meaning that this sentence has? What are all the different things it could mean? And after you get all the things that it could mean, what is its total meaning given that? And also, how do you take understand all the facts about all the meaning? Might be another way of looking at it. So this I think would all of the exercise questions are good, but this would be I think a very exciting question to do, because it sort of brings together all the elements in the chapter. But other questions are great too. Particularly if we look at 4, piety is very important. Is a very important word for Socrates. His life depends on how it is defined. What are some more contemporary words whose definitions can have significant consequences for people's lives? So we look at our contemporary situation, right? We don't really use the word piety anymore. We might use legal or illegal, moral or immoral. But there's a ton of other words that have quite a bit of consequences. So depending on how they're defined and how they relate to people's interaction in society. So this, I think, would also be another one. And again, it talks about the complexity of language and the concepts that we have that make language extremely complex, or that simplify concepts too much, that don't capture the complexity of life itself. Okay, so I hope this helps. I will finish responding to all of your homework for the first question, and I'll post this today, and this will be due again on Friday. Email me if you have any questions. Take care.